Hello, welcome back to another episode of The Feminine Frequency. I'm Carrie Gatto, and today I'm joined by Hope Rose, who is a woman who is in service to the highest good of all. I'm so honored to have you here today, Hope. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me, Carrie. I appreciate it.
You are so welcome. So we actually connected on social media and as you do. And one of the things that really resonated with me about your content was how you really talk about how it's possible to turn pain into purpose. And this idea of alchemy, of transmuting the dark parts in life and somehow turning them into power and into meaning and into art. And yeah, that just speaks really to me and to my life experience, to the work I do with other women. I think it's such a powerful reframe. And so, yeah, I wanted to just start by asking you to share a little bit about kind of how you got here. What is your story and why are you so passionate about this topic?
Great question. Thank you for connecting with me online. Yeah, people don't meet. Well, I guess people still meet at bars these days. People meet on social media. Um, I guess I'll start out by saying I am still in the process of turning my ashes into art or into alchemy. I'm certainly not on the end of my journey. I don't know if anybody is ever at the end of their journey or towards the end of it, but I would say I'm kind of still in the beginning towards the middle process of it. And so how I got here is specifically in the last couple of years, I was in a very uh, abusive relationship with my ex. We were together 2 years, and I had a little boy. He was born April of 2018. His name is River. And the domestic violence really escalated after he was born. And ultimately, his father walked out on us when he was 6 months old. I was literally just left with an infant in the middle of winter with no car, no home, like literally nothing. And I was like, how do I raise a 6 month old with no resources? Oh my gosh. Like, if you go to my personal podcast, you can kind of hear like the 2 hour interview I did on my story of all of this. And then he took me to court. We are not legally married. I'm not a fan of the government dictating whether I can be married or not. So it was my choice not to get married. Our relationship was like literally almost 2 years to the day from start to finish. And for almost the past 6 years, I have been in a very nasty court battle for custody and child support and visitation and all that stuff. Just, I mean, it's been wild. And as these stories are kind of being played out across the nation, globally, and even here in the States, we as a culture have a very unhealed masculine and feminine side too. And the longer I'm in this family court battle, the more I just see there's just so much healing to be done. And these men are lashing out because they have unhealed wounds. They attack the mother. And mothers are, and I'll speak kind of on the feminine, masculine, gender specific, not just the energy of it. And
Mhm.
so mothers are wired to protect their young. If a mom, that's what we're called, mama bears. I have a hat that says mama bear on it. And when somebody, threatens our children, like, we're going to protect them, especially when abuse is involved. And the fathers are attacking the mothers by, like, we're going to take your children away because for whatever reason, for unhealed trauma they have in their past, instead of addressing it and realizing that mothers are an important part of their children's life. We're just going to take the children away because we're so unhealed. And
To
that's
punish
exactly
her, to
what was
like
that?
more to punish the mother than
To
anything
punish,
else.
yeah, punish the mother because they know taking their children away is the most horrendous act you could ever do.
Yeah.
Um, and a little bit of like biology side, mothers carry the cells of their children, whether they're miscarried, stillborn, or living, their entire life. And so we actually have a part of our children, like genetically, biologically inside of us. And that's why the pain for mothers is so much greater than just the fathers.
Mm,
Um, and so that's a really important, distinction. To not that fathers are not important, but when you attack the mothers and the children, you're the fathers are continuing that cycle of trauma.
yeah.
And part of my mission is to, stop the trauma and start the healing. And so I didn't have much, financial resources. He had a lot. And so he had a very high powered attorney, and was very manipulative in his court, tactics. And he lied to steal my child from me that had been with me every single second of his life for 4 years.
Wow.
Um, and so in April of 2022, my son was ripped out of my arms. I have not seen or heard from him since. I really don't know where my son is to this day. And that's been 2.5 years as of this recording. And so this major, large fracture in my life really caused me to, like, okay, where did I play a piece in this story? Like, what was my contribution? How did I get here? Because I was like, this fracture is too big to ignore. If I ignore this, I can't even imagine what a larger fracture will be. And so this intense, it's even more than pain. I mean, it's grief and sadness and just so much wrapped together in this story. There's a lot more to it, but that's kind of like the major pain piece of these ashes. I mean, I lost everything to protect my child. Um and stood up against the system, and they don't like strong women who know what's right. And so I have taken these last 2.5 years to really kind of dive into, my personal history and what can I heal and how do I alchemize this intense, just this small piece of my story to really guide others out of their pain. There's many mothers going through this on a daily basis. Unfortunately, I am not the exception to this. This is happening in everybody's courtrooms in their cities right now. And many people don't realize this. And so we have a major crisis on our hands. We have like, our country is in pain from so many different angles, and people don't know how to heal the trauma within inside them and stop these cycles from continuing. And so I believe I have been given this gift that I do not want to open, and I'm opening it anyway to really share with others this very painful part of my story, of my life, of like, if I can make it through this, here's my hand, let's walk together out of your pain, and share that the hope rises from the ashes, and
Mm,
alchemize this into a really powerful story of like, yes, this happened, and I was able to use it for good. I was able to use it for the highest service of all, instead of just getting very burdened down by the grief. And there's certainly a time and place for that. Trust me, I've been on my knees, just deep, deep wailing. And the body needs that opportunity to release that, and then also to acknowledge, like, okay, there's a time for weeping and there's a time for joy, and let's move forward out of this, and let's start the healing. We don't need to keep dragging each other through, court, or anger fights, or whatever the situation might be, of who's right and who's wrong. Like, what is in the highest service for our children, for our future generations, for our neighbors, for our friends, for anybody who we interact with? Like, is this choice in the highest service of all? And so that's kind of my take on, turning pain into purpose, and even going further of like turning pain into a vision. And that's kind of where I'm at now, of like really turn my pain into like a larger picture, like the story I have, personally experienced. How can that vision, really transform and transcend and transmute the pain of as many people as possible?
Wow. That is that is a powerful, powerful story. And I'm hearing it for the first time, and I just can't even imagine how painful that must have been and must be. And I mean, yeah, thank you for sharing. Thank you for
Yeah,
sharing your
thank you.
story.
Yeah, thank you for listening. And it's like these, these I realize these stories are hard, and um I
Mhm.
also realized the more that we hide, for a long time, I was kind of ashamed of this story because it's so painful. So many people like, did you deserve it? What did you do? You must have been a bad mother, like all these judgments. And it's like, no, I've been acknowledged as a great mother. And because I was a great mother, that's why this happened. Bad mothers really don't get their kids taken because it's just like, whatever. It's the good mothers that do stand up for the truth, like the truth. And so that's why I keep kind of tearing the band-aid off and sharing this story, really in hopes of bringing attention to what is happening in our country, and then also just whatever painful situation somebody is going through, of like, oh, this woman has somehow been able to make it out, so can I. And I just really feel like this is a very broader message, and I've just spirit source has chosen me, has selected me to, like, okay, here is, like, here, like, I just picture, like, here's the gift I am given to you. How are you going to be responsible in sharing this message and sharing this story in the service of others, as hard as it is? And that's what I feel like my calling is for,
Mhm. Mhm.
part of it at least.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, there's so many ways we could go. Are you working with other women who have had similar situations, and or do you feel that this is a broader calling to both those women and people who are going through other kinds of loss and grieving challenges in their lives?
Yeah, I mean, taking specifically working, like, as in paid services, no, there is definitely there's a huge community of us women who have gone through this. And just because of my experience, like, I've been connected with, unfortunately, too many. There's too many moms going through this, and it just breaks my heart because this damage is being done to the children. Like,
Right.
it's just like, just stop. And so part of this, I've really been in deep meditation, just like, how do I reach the fathers who are doing this? Not in a victimized way, like I say doing this, but I'm a woman. And what can I do to help both sides, specifically, like, I mean, the mothers too, because they're healing, like, they're going through this intense trauma, but also, like, these fathers, they're just so caught up in their unhealed trauma ego that they don't see the damage they're doing to themselves and to their children. And I don't have the answer for that yet. And so that's why I have kind of gone broader. Like, and that's what my podcast kind of is about, is really just transforming whatever grief you've experienced, whether it's, the death of a family member, whether it's a loss of a business, like just general loss and grief, just
Mm,
to kind of get my story out there and reach a wider audience. And maybe through that process, I can reach some of these fathers through this, sharing of my story.
mm,
But I really do think there's a huge crucial need. I mean, the family court general industry is definitely an industry. It's over 60 billion a year. I mean, it's a huge, yeah, it's an industry. Um, and so I would love to see family court demolished. It's not helping a single person out there. It's just, squabbling over who gets the bed, and, I want this, quilt. And it's just like, guys, and that didn't happen to me, but I'm just speaking because I didn't have a divorce. But that's what, if there's a divorce on
Right.
the table, and that's kind of what happens. And if you kind of, and that's what I mean by like alchemy, if you kind of take the hummingbird approach of like, oh my gosh, I'm fighting about a quilt. Who cares who has the quilt? You know what I mean? Like in the grand scheme of things, like let the mom have the quilt, let the dad have like the car, like the universe will provide. Instead of like, a lot of these men don't want to pay child support. And so this, I mean, the systemic issue is just, it's so deep. It's so deep on so many levels. Men have been demasculated, and so they're not in their true masculine sense. And the women have, kind of taken on the masculine role. And, some of the feminist movement, I will say, has kind of contributed to this problem of, everything has, women have wanted to, have higher paying jobs and executive roles. And not that I'm against that. I'm an entrepreneur myself, but biologically and in the true feminine essence, that's not our innate um, response. And so when that's been taken from the masculine, we have this, inverse, like an inversion of these roles. Um, does that make sense?
It does. I mean, I get what you're saying, but also I think that feminism at its core is about equal rights and opportunities. And I think the problem is that we're as a society, we're over identified with the masculine. So when we, men or women, think of success and freedom, we think of the masculine ways of going about getting those things because that's what we've seen modeled in our society and in our culture. So therefore, when a woman thinks, I want to go and get success and freedom, she takes these masculine paths of doing that because that's all she knows to be available. So I don't think it's necessarily that feminism has made women more masculine. I think it's our culture is over identified to the masculine. And when women got opportunities and rights that were more equivalent to men, they did emulate men in some ways because they didn't have models of empowered women.
For sure. And yeah, I mean, being an empowered woman is different than taking the man's role on. And that's, I guess that's
Right.
the what I see kind of playing out in many different systems and in life is uh women are still they're still expected to like raise the children, provide 100%, and fathers check out. And so it's like, yes, I'm grateful for women to have these rights, but some of the problems I see is specifically like in the family court is like a lot of these states are moving to 50-50. They're not even like 50-50 custody of like the child lives, 2 nights here and 2 nights here. Well, let's think about the children for a second. These children are living out of a suitcase. They don't have like a stable home, and it kind of comes of like everything should be equal. Well, life is not necessarily equal. Some people live in studios, some people live in mansions. And so I mean,
Yeah.
it's a bigger topic than what this podcast is for, but I guess, microcosmically, I just see this issue of this issue being played out in a bigger, intense way, and try and like how can I use my story again to like, let's kind of take back our our feminine traits and our masculine traits, heal both that needs to be healed, and
Yeah.
like respect like Mother Earth. Just let's just take the feminine for example. Mother Earth is not being respected at all.
Right. Yeah.
And when fathers are attacking physical mothers, they're attacking physical earth. Mother
Yeah.
Earth. And
Yeah.
so it's a bigger, it's a huge topic. And so I guess I'm
Hmm.
very passionate about, like, we have to heal our souls, our soil, Mother Earth, and in service to that, in service to healing the soil tangibly, and in service to healing our souls, so we can have a cohesive, peaceful life. Nobody likes court. Court is just about fighting, it's manipulation, it's like these tactics, and we're going to hire PIs. And if you just, branch out into, like, you know, the things that have been happening in our country the last couple of years, it's all about money, power, and control. People don't like to be controlled, told what to do. Like, we are sovereign beings. And so that's also part of, like, my calling is to help people, come back to their sovereign being and in control of their life, and not being a victim
Right.
to, like, their circumstances. And that's what's getting played out in court, is that both sides are kind of playing the victim. Yes, there's quote unquote victims. Yeah, how do I've always struggled with how to say this. Like, there's
Yeah.
victimized, but you don't have to be a victim. And even, like, you might be victimized, but you don't have to take on that identity. Yes, things have happened. It's my choice. It's my responsibility how I respond to them. And that's really the work I've been doing the last couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we're kind of saying the same thing in that, our culture, there are just imbalances in the culture. There are things that have been going on for thousands of years and many generations that have trickled down from one generation to the next that have created these unhealed patterns. And I mean, we're immersed in our culture. None of us can say that we're separate from it. Like, we live in it. And so, we have capitalism, we have patriarchy, we have a legal system which is based in, like you said, a victim mentality of who can I blame for my problems? Let me go and sue them. Let me bring them into court. And yeah, I think the shift and the healing it happens first on an individual level. And then, because each one of us, we are the culture, we make up the culture. It's not an abstract concept, it's something that lives in our hearts. So as each of us heals, it will ripple out to the rest of society, the rest of our culture. The culture will mirror back to us a more healed, empowered people. So I think talking about the micro and the macro, like, that's what I believe, is that, like, each one of us are sovereign beings. And when we come back into balance with ourselves, when we heal ourselves, when we come back into harmony in our energy and our being, then that's the best thing we can do for others as well. It's the best thing we can do for the world. So it's so easy to point the finger. It's so easy to say, well, if they didn't do that, then I wouldn't have to do this, and on and on and on. But really, our sole responsibility is just to be the best version of ourselves that we can be. And that will, in effect, help everyone around us, everyone who we touch, and even those people we don't touch, because of the ripple effect.
Absolutely. Yeah. When one person heals, like, we all heal. It's like, that little rock in the water, where that ripple. I know, I just see this visual of just, rippling out. And 2024, as is being recorded, I do feel somewhat of a shift. Like, more people are becoming awake, or of, like, doing the healing work. And that's specifically, when this happened, 2.5 years ago, I was like, oh, okay, I now have, like, dedicated time to heal all my generational crap. And also, like, the buck stops here. And
Mhm.
really taking this time of, like, yes, there's a time for grief and mourning and the sadness, but also taking this time of, like, oh, I've been given this gift of, I was a struggling single mom for 4 years, and I was in survival mode and didn't even have the capacity. That's why things got
Yeah.
so out of hand, because my nervous system was just completely shot. it was just a ticking time bomb until like this fracture happened. And so you're exactly right. Like using this time, using this space of like, yes, this happened. How do I turn this around for good? And that's part of the good of like, oh, I have this opportunity. I've been given this opportunity to heal so that others can heal. And I'm even like, I hope my ex heals. Like, I hope my healing like heals
Yeah.
him. And there's still times where I get super triggered. It's getting better. I'm not going to say I have an A+ in it. So I think it's definitely a practice if I think too intently about it, just being super super honest, super real.
Mm-hmm.
um, but there are times where I'm able to energetically send him compassion and love, because
Wow.
a person who does this type of thing is it's like an x-ray. I can see how much they're hurting. They're so wounded that in order to make themselves feel good, in order to feel that, in order to fill that void they have had to do something like this. I'm talking about my ex. I'm talking about
Yep.
just anybody in general. When somebody really, I always say unhealed people hurt people, because you
Yeah.
can be hurt and you can still be kind and compassionate. So I don't always necessarily align with hurt people, because you can feel
Okay.
hurt and still do good. Like,
Yep.
yes, I'm hurt, but I can show up on this podcast. I can share my story. I can, offer a smile or a kind word or be support to
Yeah.
mom going through that. So it's the unhealed people that haven't, stopped in their tracks and been and like, oh, I'm operating out of this pattern. Oh, it's like, like, and
I
so they
like
just can't.
that. I like that nuance because I feel like, hurt and pain, emotional pain, it can actually give us something, right? Like it gives us compassion. It gives us empathy. It can give us texture in our lives. You know, without the pain, we can't have pleasure, right? It's like without the storm, you can't have, the rainbow to be corny. But yeah, it's like if you I've noticed for myself, like if I have a painful moment, if I'm going through something, if I'm feeling sad, it's like it opens up the doors of empathy for other people too. It's all of a sudden like my heart kind of like opens. Whereas if we never got to experience that, if we never got to have any suffering in our lives, then we wouldn't have any empathy or compassion for other people. Where would the kindness be without that, right? So it's like it's almost like the pain is what makes us human. It's what connects us to each other. It's what gives us the capacity to be vulnerable, to be intimate, to really connect deeply with other humans because all know what that is like, right? So to me, that's part of the alchemy is like accepting that it's here, like those feelings, those emotions happen for a reason. There's not no value to them. It's not like we're just coping and we have to just kind of deal with these things that come our way. There's also like you mentioned earlier, like you're opening a gift. If you actually are willing to be present with the feelings that you might be having in any given moment, even when they're hard, even when it feels like a breakdown, if you are willing to be with it and open the gift, there is a reason, there is something in there to give you another level of awareness or to help you, create more meaning or to touch someone else's lives or to evolve in some way.
Absolutely. I always have like this visual of like the gift I didn't want to open, and it's like covered in I use a lot of metaphors, so hope rose. So like this gift is like covered in a rose bush. And a hand is like, reaching in, like trying to like open the package. And to reach in, you have to go through the thorns. To reach that rosebud, you have to go through the thorns. So it's going to be bloody. It's going to be excruciating. It's going to be, like you feel the shards of glass or the thorns, like you feel all of that. And then once you reach the flower, the transcendence or, the transformation or like, oh, the purpose of it, the vision, then it's like, oh, now I've touched it. I've touched source. And
Yeah.
kind of that healing can like wash over you. And it's, like it's through, your work that you're able to, take that pain and alchemize it. Like some people don't, some people are just so stuck in their ego that they don't even realize they're operating in pain.
Mhm.
And that's what we're seeing play out in our society now. Like, I mean, from like road rage to like, I mean, just so many different things, not necessarily, just focused on, the family court situation. But just generally speaking of their, yes, more,
Mechanism.
more
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, if people are more in the spiritual development sector, we more have like the empathetic, side where, empaths or we feel people, those phrases are thrown around. But some people don't even have the capacity to realize, oh, I'm in pain. How can I be compassionate? They just
Right.
see pain. They just feel their pain and I'm going to hurt more. I'm going to, like lash
Yeah,
out. And so it takes a high level of like the first step of any transformation is awareness.
absolutely.
And if we don't have awareness for like what we're doing, why we're doing it, we don't even have the capacity to be like, oh, I'm in pain. How can I turn this for good? Versus I'm in pain and I'm just going to, cut somebody off in traffic, or I deserve to, have my glass filled with water at all times, just very self centered. So it takes a high level individual to get to that place of like, oh, why do I feel so? Am I feeling entitled? Like what's driving this? Because I didn't get my needs met when I was, a child. This is still playing out, at age 50.
And yeah, and I think pain often it can, if left suppressed or unresolved, it can turn into anger, right? Very easily. We
Rage.
feel
Yeah.
hurt and we lash out. And, I've noticed this in myself. Like if I'm mad at my husband, sometimes I'll yell at my kids because, it's just like, and then I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I'm not even mad at them. I need to go talk to my husband if I'm being aware enough to reflect. But like you said, you have to have the awareness, or yeah, it's so easy to project our hurt onto other people. And I think I just want to circle back to what you said earlier about forgiving. I don't know if you use the term forgiveness, but you said you send love and compassion to your ex, which sounds like forgiveness, but maybe not. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think that is just so beautiful. Um, that just shows an elevation of your awareness and of your spirit. That is such a high vibration. That is such a high frequency when you can actually feel and send love to someone who has created so much hurt for you, just in knowing that, they're human, they're hurting, and actually having compassion. Like that is a miracle. That is godlike.
Well,
Really.
thank you. Yeah, thank you for reflecting that. And like, I want to sit and receive that because ego is like, wants to come up and say all the times I haven't done that, and it's like, no, I am evolving. Of like, do I get it right every time? No, but I really strive to like, oh, if he comes up in my awareness throughout the day, like just recently, I was working on some court documents and I had to read some of his messages from a couple years ago, and they were just vicious, just vicious. And it triggered me. And it was just like, send compassion, send love. He's hurting. Like, you're bigger than this. Don't let him steal my power. And that
Mm-hmm.
takes, let me tell you, for everybody listening, that takes a very strong presence to do that, because you like naturally we just want to be like, I'm right, he's wrong, this should not have happened. And to kind of reel yourself back in and be like, okay, this is where we are. I'm right here at this moment. This happened. How can I use this for the greater good, for the highest good of all? And it takes a lot of hard, difficult work. It's not easy. So I'm still in the daily practice of it.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I don't think it ever ends, right? The work that the inner work never ends. Um,
No, there's always new layers to uncover.
yeah. But I just really wanted to acknowledge that because, I do think forgiveness is such a divine thing that we have the capacity for as humans, and it's not for the other person, right? We hear that all the time. Like you don't forgive for them, you forgive for yourself, because the anger that might be eating you up is toxic in your system. So you forgive for yourself, you forgive so you can come back to balance and wholeness and love inside of yourself. On a much lower scale, I've experienced that with a neighbor of mine who actually was not very nice to me and to my kids. This was years ago, but it was, quite upsetting. And I couldn't understand where this was coming from. And it was beyond me. I was like, I don't know why, that she'd always been nice in the past, blah, blah, blah. But I just remember walking down the street. Of course, I walk by her house like every day. But I remember walking down the street and I was just like, I'm letting it go. This has nothing to do with me. It has nothing to do with me. It's everything to do with her. I don't know why, what happened, why she's so upset and hurt and mad, but I have to let it go. And the weight off my shoulders and off my energy field was like, woo, it was like a rush almost. So I just will never forget that feeling of like, oh, okay, I can choose that. I can choose to do that. Okay, great. Mental note.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, and like you claimed your power back, because in those situations, it's like she was like, siphoning your power, your energy into that, and then it was throwing
Mhm.
you off kilter. And I just think that's so beautiful. Of like, oh, I have this choice to do this, and then it's like you kind of like severed that cord, and
Yeah.
like you got your power back, and you were able to like fully function again. So it's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. Sovereignty again. Like
Yeah.
I'm reading a book right now. I don't know if you've read it. It's pretty popular. The Four Agreements by
Oh,
Don Ruth.
yeah.
He says one of the agreements is don't take anything personally. It- it's so simple and
Right.
so
Yeah.
powerful.
That's yeah, I've been working on that one for I've been working on that one for years.
Yeah.
It's that one's definitely a minute by minute practice. One kind
Yeah.
of like quote that just downloaded to me, it was just you hear the phrase like kill them with kindness. I like to kind of like take that to, we don't want to kill, we want to heal with kindness. And
Mm-hmm.
I think the other thing too, this quote came to me a couple years ago as well. If we had forgiveness, we wouldn't have court. Like, I mean, just
Truly.
like anything, like not specific to family court, but just lawsuits in general of like, I'm going to sue you because you didn't, do this in business. Or, I mean, just think of how many court, like how many attorneys are in the country, like attorneys
Right.
would be in their jobs, if we had true autonomy, sovereignty, claimed our power, we would eradicate this system of who's right and who's wrong and you owe me. Because when we get into that situation of like you owe me, we're done. Like, or we've given everything away. And when we claim back of like, nope, you don't owe me anything, I'm my whole, like I am 100%. um and so
Yeah.
just even just thinking about that dynamic in everyday life of like, oh, where do I need to show up as a sovereign woman or man, if you're listening, person, human, um, and like really reclaim that power and that like forgiveness. And I'll touch a little bit on forgiveness because that's definitely, it's still a process for me. But
Of
one of my,
course.
yeah, one of my teachers gave me a really good script for it. And I think I've written, I don't know if I need to write about it. I think I have it on my Instagram, but there's two different statements. And to like, part of forgiveness is letting yourself off the hook. And so these statements are, I forgive myself for judging myself as fill in the blank bad, whatever the judgment is, because the truth is fill in the blank. And then you can also do it as, I forgive, you know, fill in the blank, my mom, for being X, as the truth is. And that is one way to kind of start as a process to start forgiving yourself, forgiving those who have, done you harm or done you wrong, that you perceive. And then the second statement is, I forgive myself for buying into the misbelief blank as the truth is blank. And so those two statements have been super helpful in my personal transformational journey. And I do them like every day. Even just throughout the day, I have them memorized of like in an instant of like, if I'm, feeling angry at my ex or feeling angry at the situation or feeling sadness that I don't know where my sweet boy is. I come back to those statements.
Yeah, I
Or
love that
yeah.
because it really covers all the bases. It's not just forgiving the other person, it's also forgiving yourself. It's also forgiveness around even having a belief pertaining to that judgment. It's like, yeah, that feels really like thorough and nourishing. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, I found them to be very beneficial, writing them down or, saying them in your head. And really, really my suggestion would just be to like, if you're, struggling with anything in your life, if you want freedom and sovereignty in your life, to really tap into those. Because if you're still judging yourself, shaming yourself,
Mhm.
holding yourself as the victim, you're never going to have like the abundance you want, the family, like the relationship, the family, the money, like the dream life you envision, because you're still holding yourself under the weight of those judgments and misbeliefs. And through that process, you might not even know what your misbeliefs are until you kind of start working different things. But those two statements have been profound in my life, and I love sharing them because it's free and it can do amazing, amazing things in your life.
Yeah, yeah, and to just kind of continue the topic of victimhood, and we touched on that earlier too. I think um that's something that like it's so powerful. And I think that finding the meaning in your story, finding the purpose is something that really helps us to see ourselves as the heroine of our story rather than the victim, and gives us a sense of faith too, that we are supported, that we're not alone, that we can do hard things, that we can overcome our challenges, right? It's and it's a reframe. It's like, how do we relate to our circumstances? How do we relate to our experience? Do we see ourselves as having agency, as being the main character, right? Or do we, as a writer of our story, or do we see ourselves as just the victim and everything is happening to us? And when, yes, people can be victimized, people can have atrocious things that happen, and in that moment, they're a victim. But it's the story that we tell after that moment. How do we keep seeing ourselves as a victim, or are we able to reframe it and find the meaning, find the purpose, find a bigger kind of context for it the way that you have, is there some way that we can take this and make ourselves the heroine? And then everything shifts. That's, that's really the heroine's journey, is going through the dark, the descent, and then finding the light and realizing that it's not the end, it's a rebirth. This is like a motif that goes back to ancient goddess cultures. It's in the myth of Persephone and the myth of Inanna, and it's in all these ancient initiations. But nowadays we've sort of lost touch with that, and we think, oh, I'm feeling pain, let me take a pill, let me fix it, let me drink some alcohol, let me, blame someone else, take them to court, like whatever it is, instead of just being like, okay, I'm in the dark night of the soul, I'm in the painful part, I'm in the fire. Now, how, as I move through this, what if there was a reason this was happening, what might it be? Like, if there was some way that I could make this into something good, what might that look like? And then just opening the door to what that possibility might be. And sometimes just cracking that door open, just like a little bit, lets the light in enough where you're like, okay, maybe I'm not a victim. Maybe there is hope. Maybe there is a way out of this tunnel. Like, if I can find the compassion in my heart to, have this pain help someone else, you know, even if it's just a little bit, even if it's just telling them that I understand, that could help someone immensely. So just, yeah, it's like a whole different just approach, this victim to heroin, but it's not, it can happen quickly for people once they start seeing themselves as having agency, as having control, and take their power back and stop blaming other people or blaming circumstances or whatever it might be. It can change everything. That's when we become empowered. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. A couple things came to me. Let's see if I can remember them all. One, and I guess, even the word survivor, like before, it was funny, like in the beginning, before we recorded, you asked me like, what's your title? And, before I would say, oh, I'm a survivor.
Mm,
And that, which is true, there, that
yep.
is true, but the truth is that I'm more powerful than a survivor, because when the frequency, the energy of the word survivor, it's like I am still beneath like I'm beneath the perpetrator, like I'm still beholden to being victimized. And so that took me a process of like, it just didn't feel right one day of like, I'm not a survivor. It's like that damsel in distress, like, save me. Oh my gosh, like, come rescue me, like that energy. And it's like, no, like, yes, it's true, I'm a survivor, but that's not my identity. Because if I put my identity as a survivor, I'm like, that's how my energy is lived out in 24/7 action. Well, I don't want that energy. I want the energy of like, I'm a sovereign free being, no matter what is happening externally, internally, I am sovereign, I have autonomy. And so that's the energy I want to put out into the world. Because if I go around like I'm just a survivor, that's the energy that's gonna, it's not conducive. And then, you were speaking about the fire. My son's first birthday apart, which was, gosh, a year and a half ago. It was hard day. First birthday I haven't been a part of. Just very hard day. And that night I had I have very vivid dreams. And so that night, like source came to me and it was like, the fire shall not consume you, it shall shape you. It was like, I still, like a year and a half later, I still get chills by that. It just was so real and so visceral. And so I remember that. I don't know how that quote will end up in the world someday, other than maybe this podcast, but that
Beautiful.
still comes to me in a day by day basis of like, when I feel like I'm being burned to a crisp, like it's gonna, and that's why I kind of use the word, art, of like, this fire is shaping me into like this beautiful art piece that's never been on display before. And only I can make it. Only you can make your art with whatever ashes you have. And you're the master. You're the masterpiece painting that very individual piece that nobody else can. And you've been given that gift to give that to the world. And when people see that masterpiece, they can't but help, like, wow, that is beautiful. I want that. Like, I want to create my masterpiece too.
That is beautiful. Oh my gosh, that's so powerful. I mean, talk about alchemy, right? That's it right there. Oh, well, I feel like that's a good spot to complete the podcast. That really wraps it up. Thank you so much for sharing your story and your wisdom with us. It really means the world. Thank you, Hope.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. And thank you for listening, everyone. I hope you'll join us next time for another episode of the Feminine Frequency. Bye for now.